Good morning, my most valued marketing researchers. Welcome again to today's lesson on the sampling process. As we all know, preparing and designing the sampling procedure for any marketing research project is very crucial and important in any kind of a project, considering that it is not always feasible to actually collect data from an entire population, considering the time and financial constraints that researchers might be having. So today's lesson will be based on the following learning outcomes. First, you should be expected to at least understand the concepts involved in sampling. You should be able to develop a sampling plan. And last but most importantly, you should be able to draw out a sample for a specified research study of your choice. Right, the first step in the sampling process is on defining the population of interest. Most people refer to this as the target population. Some people merely refer to it as the sample. Basically, what a population of interest is, what it comprises of is those individuals from whom we're interested in collecting data from. So basically, the population of interest will have elements that we refer to as the units of analysis. In other words, those are the specific people or the specific individuals or groups from whom we intend to collect data. In most cases, when we specify the target population, we make reference to different demographic attributes. For instance, in marketing, you would talk about perhaps the age of the respondents that you're interested in collecting data from. That would be, you would specify perhaps that you will collect your data from generation Y. You would also specify issues such as the gender. Some researchers would demand that you only collect data from an all-female sample, whereas some researchers would be restricted to an all-male sample. Nonetheless, that is the sample element. In other words, the specific units from whom you intend to collect data from. It is also important, whilst you're defining your target population, to indicate the geographical location of your population or of your sample of interest. For instance, you can indicate that your data will be collected from Generation Y consumers who are based in South Africa. In other instances, you can also indicate the time frames. In other words, the target population residing in South Africa in the year 2017. So this is where we start off by defining who our population of interest comprises. All right, the second step in the sampling process involves the specification of a sampling frame. Basically, a sampling frame is a list of population elements or members from which to select units to be sampled. In marketing, there are numerous lists or databases that we make use of when we are conducting our sampling procedures. Basically, the most common list that we make use of, if it is a university setup, that's the easiest that's coming to mind right now. We would make use of databases from the registration department. Then that's where you might be able to get the list of students that you could include in your study. Or you could use municipal records in a particular area. It could be municipal records for a town, for a city, and that is where you could be able to get your potential respondents to include in your study. What is most important with this sampling frame is it must be complete and it must be free from duplicate elements. It must also be accurate, and it must also be free from foreign elements. So basically, any sampling frame that you use is only relevant and it is only valid for as long as it is complete, accurate, and free from duplicate elements. It must also be free from foreign elements. What I mean by that, being free from foreign elements, remember in step 1, you already specified your target population. So your sampling frame should only comprise of those individuals that fall within your designated target group. If there are any elements that are to the exclusion of that target population, they should not in any case be included in that sampling frame. So I'll take, for example, you're conducting your research on fashion, consumers that purchase fashion from online stores, or what we normally refer to in marketing as our pure play retailers. Your target population could be specified as those Generation Y consumers that have purchased from pure play fashion stores in the past 3 to 6 months. When you identify your sampling frame, it's very important that you find a list of population elements that has a list that has got the specific people or individuals that have actually shopped from online stores. So what you can do is you can visit market and research syndicated firms. An example is Accentric. You visit that syndicated firm where they can furnish you with a database of online consumers based in South Africa. So from that database, you will know that you are going to sample or draw out exactly individuals that are precisely online shoppers. So you could use that database from the marketing research firm as your sample frame. Right, the third step, having identified your sample frame, you move on to determining your sampling method. Basically, the sampling method or the technique that you use when you are drawing out your sample can be categorized as either probability-based or non-probability-based. These two are distinct types of sampling methods that are normally used. Probability-based methods are procedures whereby each element in the population has a known non-zero probability of being included in the sample. In other words, the sample elements are selected by chance, and this chance is known for each element being selected. Now, the fact that I've mentioned probability, I think it can automatically click in people's minds that this is statistically determinable. So probability-based sampling methods can be determined statistically. You can use a calculation where you can easily estimate the allowable error or the confidence, the level of confidence for which you would want your sample to be drawn. For instance, if you permit an allowable error of 5%, that means the results that you will draw from that particular sample are likely to be 95% representative of the entire population. So those are probability-based sampling methods. We usually speak of simple random sampling. That's the easiest one. We talk of stratified sampling, systematic sampling, and cluster sampling. I believe you can go through your textbook, your prescribed textbook, in order to find detail regarding the explanations on those different probability sampling methods. On the other hand, you could also make use of non-probability-based sampling methods. Non-probability-based sampling methods are known for their subjectivity. Why? Because they rely on the discretion of the researcher, and there's no explicit scientific model that could be used to assess the degree of sampling error. In other words, there is no statistical determination that we use when we apply non-probability sampling methods. We merely rely on the intuition and the judgment of the researcher per se. The examples of non-probability methods could be snowball sampling, quarter sampling, judgmental sampling, and convenience sampling. In most cases, researchers apply non-probability sampling methods because they are least expensive, and also they save a bit of time. In most cases also, you would find that researchers that make use of non-probability sampling methods actually have not been able to access an accurate sampling frame, so they are in a way forced to, or they end up resorting to utilizing non-probability sampling methods. Right, the fourth step in the sampling process after selecting or nominating your sampling method would be then to determine your sample size. It's very important to remember that a sample is a subset of a population. So what's most important is the size of the sample that you utilize be large and representative enough of the entire population in order to enhance the quality and accuracy of your results. So there are different methods or different ways that we normally utilize to actually determine the sample size. I normally indicate to my students that whenever you think about establishing your the sample size for your study, think about utilizing either qualitative measures or quantitative measures. What would that mean? If you utilize quantitative measures, for instance, as you can see on the slide, you make use of statistical considerations. For instance, if you want to increase the degree of variability in the population, in other words, you would want a heterogeneous type of results from your study. If you want to increase precision in your results, if you want to increase the degree of confidence, also if you want to increase the extent to which the analysis will utilize, will make use of other subsamples, it's very important to make use of large sample sizes. There are very numerous scholars that attest to different thresholds You could talk of Roscoe, who asserts that Roscoe 1975, he asserted that sample sizes larger than 500, for instance, especially in consumer samples, they are very useful in yielding quality results. Other thresholds have also been put forward by different scholars regarding the extent to which your sample size can be drawn. Right. Other than the statistical considerations, there are other non-statistical considerations that you can make use of upon drawing your sample size. For instance, you can consider historical evidence. What I mean by that is you can go back to your literature or to the theory that you have been consulting and try to check those previous studies to see the sample sizes that were considered in those researches. If the researches are consistent with the work that you're doing, it would be within your interest to then determine a sample size that is somewhat closely associated with the sample size that has been used by previous researchers. Zygmunt 2013 refers to that as empirical evidence. Right. The last consideration that you can make is to take practical considerations, especially with studies that are conducted by students, where you consider the amount of money that has been proffered to you in terms of the research funding that you have received from your institution, or the amount of time that you have been given by your study leader to complete the study, or the number of field workers or personnel that you have to assist you with the field work process. So all these considerations need to be taken into they need to be taken up, or you need to look into these aspects before you determine the correct sample size. As I said, also, it's very important to make sure that you use more than one consideration, or you apply more than one consideration upon determining a sample size. It is usually advisable to consider both qualitative and quantitative measures upon determining the correct sample size for your study. Finally, the last step would then be to execute your sampling plan. This study has been prepared in lieu of the fact that the marketing research project will be quantitative based. So during the sample drawing process, a lot of issues need to be considered. For instance, you need to look at the data collection stages, plus the different types or possible errors that could be encountered during the sampling process. We normally refer to what is called a sampling error and what is referred to as non-sampling error. Sampling error is the error that emanates from issues pertaining to the 5 steps that we have alluded to. For instance, you have made mistakes in nominating the correct target population, and you realize that there are problems with the type of data that you are acquiring from the field. That is referred to a sampling error. On the other hand, we can refer to a non-sampling error. Non-sampling error usually refers to issues like measurement error, wherein the measurement instrument that you are using is not accurately tapping into the issues that are of essence in your study. Or you can talk about non-response error, which in most cases comes from the respondents themselves because they are either unwilling to contribute or to participate in your study. So be on the lookout for all these types of errors, be it sampling error or non-sampling error, and it's very important to consult your research leader so that you try by all means, or you make attempts by all means to minimize this type of errors in your research. Well, that's the end of my lesson for now. I hope we'll meet again for the next lesson on the measuring instrument. I hope these few slides will be very useful towards the successful completion of your marketing research project. Please make sure to send me any questions before our discussion and before the next face-to-face lesson that we're going to have. Thank you very much. Bye.